Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I see it's 12:01. Hopefully you can all hear me. My name is Nicole Bush, Senior Director of Career and Professional Development here at Tulane Alumni Relations, Office of Alumni Relations, and really excited to have you join us today for our discussion with one of our alums, Mauri Schwartz. She's also one of our career coaches that you can connect with in addition to the people on our team. And so today we're going to be talking about ACE the interview. And as we get started, I just want to make sure that you all know that we are recording this session and it will be available later today on YouTube. Also, if you have any questions, and as we're waiting to get started here, we usually give people a minute or two, please feel free to add in the chat where you're from. If you want to add why you're joining us today too, we always love to see that. So we are ready to go. I think if no one has any questions, we'll go ahead and get started. And Mauri, I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Oh, goody.
I'm making sure we get everyone in here. You know, there's usually two of us managing these. I'm running solo today, but Mauri's going to pick it up.
All right. Thank you, Nicole. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, everyone, for attending. I am a Tulane alum from many years ago, and I'm happy that I'm a Tulane alum. And so I'm always happy to come back and share my expertise or my whatever it is, my knowledge that I've gained over all these many years of working with job seekers and working in career coaching and career consulting. I've been doing this for a really long time. And so today we're going to talk about how to ace the interview. And we have an hour totally, or just less than an hour. So I think that should be enough time for us to entertain questions. I'm the kind of person that if you have a question, during the presentation, please ask it. If it starts to slow us down, then I'll make, I'll adapt to that and make a change in that instruction. I cannot see all of you if you're raising your hand, so please just speak up if you have a question, and we'll go from there. So let me just tell you, I guess you can see, I'm president and CEO of Career Insiders. It's a company I founded over 20 years ago to do just this. And I work a lot one-on-one with clients, helping them get new careers, new jobs, new positions. And I work with companies when they have to lay people off or otherwise terminate employees. So it's called outplacement. I'm sure you've heard of that. And I also work with companies, helping them develop executive bios for their top teams. I work with people at all levels and all functions in almost all industries. So without further ado, as they used to say, I'm going to start my presentation so we can, it's the meat of the matter. Okay. Again, speak up if you have a question or if you can't see anything or whatever. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start. I've inserted a few slides into this presentation because while people have been interviewing mostly virtually, actually, for the past couple of years, and have probably learned a lot of these tips, I think it's important. There may be a few things you haven't thought about. And so I just want to cover these quickly. And if you have some other ones that you think about, you can let me know. Okay, so the first one is to use a computer versus a phone, if at all possible. Everything I'm going to tell you today is geared toward helping you make the best impression you can with the people who are evaluating you for a position. So you want to give yourself the best opportunity, and they can see and hear you best if you're working with a computer versus a phone. If you can't, that's the way it is. But if you're using a phone, be sure to make it put it at the right height and make sure it's stationary and not that you're just holding it with one hand so that it's bobbing around. Raise your computer so that you're at eye level with your camera. Quite often people will have, whether it's a phone or whether they're using a laptop, quite often it will be at a lower level, so you'll look like you're looking down to look at the camera. And also what will happen is, sometimes you can see yourself, but the viewer can see your ceiling. So people shouldn't be able to see your ceiling. They should see what's behind you, or we'll get into it in a minute, but make sure your computer is at the right level. And you aren't meaning to make people think you're looking down on them, but that's what happens. Okay, so the next thing is ensure lighting is from in front of you, and not so much from behind you. Often people will have their back to a window and have the blinds open and the sun is coming in. And that's not so bad if you have an equal light in front of you. But just know it's like when you take a photograph that you're supposed to be, the person taking the picture has their back to the sun and you're facing the sun. That way you can get, unless you're using another light source, you want to be looking into the sun. So it's the same thing with this. You want to be looking into the light, and so that people can see your face. I did a presentation yesterday and there was somebody with the blinds open behind them and I couldn't see his face at all. I mean, I could see his profile as silhouette, but I couldn't actually see his face except when he smiled. Okay, so find a quiet spot to conduct your interview to avoid distractions. If you're doing this at home, find a room where you're by yourself. And so you've got to find the right spot in terms of the visuals behind you and in terms of the light and in terms of the distraction. If you're somewhere else and you can go into a conference room, that's also helpful, but you just want to make sure that people aren't passing by you, and both for to distract you and to distract people you're speaking with, both visually and noise. And I will apologize in advance because you may hear some street noise, hopefully not too much where I am. And I would normally close the window, but I'm in San Francisco and we have hot weather. And so I have to have the window open. Anyway, so that's that. Not hot like you have, but hot for us. So we don't want distractions. Ask if you are at home and you're sharing your Wi-Fi with other people, ask them either to log off the Wi-Fi completely or make sure they're not using a high resource app like streaming. And the reason for this is you've all seen or been part of or seen ads for times when you're on the call and someone freezes up. You freeze up more often than the people on the other end, because if they're using corporate or other types of systems, they've got a stronger system and a stronger internet connection, and it happens less. But you can be the one to freeze up. You could be the one where your voice gets all garbly. These things happen, and people, will adjust, and they're forgiving. But you want to have it happen as least often as possible, so that you can make sure you're getting your point across. Make sure your sound and video are on. You all know where that mute and unmute button is. So it's funny, sometimes we'll be talking and people might not tell you that you're muted, and then it takes a while to figure out where it is. Just always know when you get on the call, make sure that you've got both turned on. Now, sometimes the host of the meeting will have these turned off for people signing on. So you might have to wait until they do that for you. Use blur my background if possible. As you can see, I don't have blur my background in this call, and that is because the computer I'm using right now for some reason doesn't give me that option. I just bought a new computer and it does have it, so I'll be switching pretty soon. But blur my background is better than any of the other virtual backgrounds. It's just solid, and people can't see anything behind you, and they see all of you in front of it. Some of those other virtual backgrounds, as you've probably seen, other things in the background once in a while pop through. and that's the case. As you can see, I've got a white wall behind me with some small framed items. And what happens if I do a virtual background, then those things hanging on the wall just shoot through and it looks very strange. So if I had an image of the Golden Gate Bridge and all the water, it would be beautiful, but then you'd see these items that, you know, these framed items just popping through. Okay, so by the way, blur my background is an option under the video right down here. Well, I guess you can't see that part of my screen, but you know, it's again down in the lower left. Some more tips: look into the camera at all times. This is really cool. You know, one thing I think is cool, that's cool about doing a Zoom interview, is that if it's a panel interview and one of you and several people on the other end, kind of like this today, you will be making eye contact with everybody at the same time. Often when you're in a panel in a room, someone asks a question or you're giving an answer, and you go, where do I focus my attention on? Is it, do I look straight at the person who asked the question, or do I spend some, cast a glance at each person while I'm talking so that no one thinks they've been forgotten? At least in Zoom, when you look at the camera, you're looking at everybody. You might want to try turning off notifications. Basically, these are the noises that come up when or at least turn the sound off for those. I mean, obviously you can't turn the sound off for the whole computer, because then you wouldn't be able to speak on your Zoom call. But you don't want beeps to keep interrupting your session. Another way to do this, if you're working on your own PC or your own computer, then you could just create a new user that have no notifications set. So you don't have to keep thinking about turning them on and off, but you could have a user on your computer that is for interviews. Amp up your energy level and smile a lot. So while they say that the camera adds, I don't know, 5 pounds, is that what they say? I'll take it, because I've gained weight through COVID and I'm having trouble losing it. So if I could just say that, okay, well, from your point of view, you're looking at me through camera added weight, any excuse will help. Anyway, so that's the case. But one of the things that it does do in addition to that is it tamps down what comes across the screen as your energy level, as your enthusiasm. So I'm always, no matter where the interview is, I'm always reminding job seekers to be enthusiastic about the opportunity. Don't be boring. So you want to keep that in mind, especially on a Zoom call. Now, you don't want to be jumping up and down, obviously, and you want to smile a lot. And again, you don't want to force it, but people hire you because they believe you can do the job well, and because they think they're going to enjoy working with you. And generally, smiles help with that. And hopefully it will encourage the other person to return that smile. It just is sort of an instinctive reflex, and that makes you feel good and it makes them feel good. And that's not always easy to do, because when you're serious about providing information about your achievements and your background and your experience, you get that way, you get serious, and then it's hard to throw a smile in. I've been practicing this for years myself, and even though I guess you can see my face now if you look at on the side, but so now that you've got everything going, you want to test everything out before the actual interview. Log on to your own Zoom meeting and look at yourself and make sure your sound and your positioning of your computer and the camera and everything is the way you want it to be. It's always good to try it, to test it out on whatever application the employer, the hiring manager, is going to be using. So I use Zoom a lot, but I know I have clients who, corporate clients who use MS Teams and so forth. I'm not crazy about MS Teams, probably because I'm just less used to it, but when that's what they want to do, that's what I go with. Okay, so I've covered, what I think are the highlights of the most important aspects of doing Zoom interviews, during virtual interviews. Again, I hope it's not overly repetitious for all of you. Now we're going to talk about the interview, and it's not what you want. I put this up there because you're going to go, what? It is what I want. I don't want a job that's not going to be the right thing for me. Well, that's true. When you're interviewing, your whole goal is to make them fall in love with you, right? So I always say you cannot turn down an offer you don't get. So you want to make sure that the ball is in your court. You want to impress them. You want to get them to want to hire you. And then, if later on, if you learn some things you're not happy about, or the offer's not what you want, you can always say no. But if you're not enthusiastic and not focused on their needs, then you won't ever get that offer. Even in today's climate, where there are more openings than there are candidates. So it's what they want. You want to frame everything that you talk about in this interview based on what they're looking for. So you identify the top 4 or 5 qualifications, look at the job posting, and go through it, look at all of it, but especially, of course, the requirements section. And sometimes it's called the qualifications section, but identify their top priorities. Usually you can tell because of the order of the list of bullets. The only thing that might be different there is quite often they'll have the education at the top of those requirements, but it won't always be the absolute required item. Sometimes it will. But I would also look at the rest of the whole job description, because some of the responsibilities that the role has and includes might be things that aren't necessarily required in the requirements, but if you have them, then those are things that you're going to want to be prepared for. And let's look at it this way. The hiring manager or the recruiter, whoever's interviewing you, they come to this interview with a shopping list, right? Think of the shopping list. So they want to, your job is to make it easy for them to find and identify in you the items on there, as many as possible of the items on their shopping list. So they're going, if they have to go to Costco and Costco rearranges where things are, then it's harder to find than if they go to a specialty store. Prices may be higher, but at any rate, the idea is that your job is to make it easy for them to see in you what they're looking for. So for each of these top 4 or 5 qualifications, describe your achievements that illustrate you fulfilled them. So write down, write or type one of the qualifications that you've identified, and then write a couple of sentences that describe your achievements or your experience that says to them, I have this. So you're not going to just say, oh, here's requirement 1. Okay, yes, I have that. You want to have a descriptive statement that would prove to them, that illustrate to them. And I use the word illustrate purposely because you're drawing a picture. You know how they say, picture's worth 1,000 words or whatever. You use words, but you want to draw a picture of what you've done that matches what they're looking for. Write them out in complete sentences. So I say this over and over again, and I emphasize this, and as you can see on the slide, because the tendency is to start out writing a complete sentence. And then by the time you get down to the second or third item, you start doing bullet points. And then you go to the last one and you just think about it. And I know this because that's what I always did when I prepared for interviews. I would do all the cool stuff and then I would just kind of go, okay, I don't feel like writing anymore. I can remember this. Don't trust that. Write them out in complete sentences. And this is your prep. And the reason why you want to do this is because when you're presenting your answer, you might start out telling a story. Mid-sentence or midway, you decide, oh, I need to tell the person this other thing first so they'll understand what I'm talking about. So if you've written it out in advance, then you will realize, oh, I have to say this other thing first. So you go back and your, document and you put this other stuff first so that when you're doing it live, you will say it in the right order. Now, these things are not going to be necessarily perfect, and you might not, remember it word for word, but the idea is to really clearly flesh out your thoughts before you go into the interview. Okay, commit them to memory at least as much as possible. I mean, you're not going to want to recite them like, you're doing the preamble to the Constitution or something, but more like you're in a place you want it to be, real life. But that does help. And practice. If you've got someone who will practice with you and give you feedback, that's fabulous. Practice by recording it. Again, you can use Zoom to record yourself or another application to record yourself so that you see yourself. We don't like to do that. Frankly, I'm looking at the camera so I don't see myself on this call. I don't like to hear myself and I don't like to see myself, but we have to do that. So you really want to practice. And when you do that, you don't want to belabor the point that you don't like, your parents or you don't like something else, but you might catch some cues of things you do. You might say, oh, I didn't smile, or I say a lot, or things like that you can actually fix. Okay. And again, all of these items on this list are important. And in fact, they're so important that you're going to hear them from me multiple times in this presentation. Anyway, that's how you prepare. This is the framework that you want to start out with. Who can tell me the top 2 dreaded questions in an interview? Just speak up since I can't see your hands. Okay, Paul, I can see your hand.
Tell me about yourself.
That's right. That's one of them. What's the other one?
Caitlin, go ahead.
The other one would probably be to tell me about what is, sorry, I just lost my train of thought there. Like a weakness of some sort. Like, what would you say is your top weakness?
There you go. You guys get A's. All right. You get an extra honorary degree from Tulane. These are absolutely the top 2 dreaded questions. What the good news is that what is your greatest weakness is asked less often as time has been. I've been doing this a long time. Everybody hates answering the question, and even those same people who ask in an interview, when they're the ones interviewing you, they don't want to get it when they're on the other end. So I've gone around asking people why they ask that question, hiring managers, and I get several different answers. One is because I thought it was always asked in an interview. Well, and I'm going, well, that's pretty lame, isn't it? And then the other 2 were things like, I don't care what the answer is, I just want to see how they react to the question. And I think I don't like that either, because I believe you want to, when you're interviewing candidates, you want to give them an opportunity to be their best selves, right? Do well. The other one is, I don't care what the answer is, but I want to see how well they can evaluate themselves and know their strengths and weaknesses. Well, I can tell you that people, for the last 2 who said they don't care what the answer is, if you tell them something that's relevant to the job, they will care. So they're disingenuous about saying they don't care. So I don't believe in giving any reason for them to, give them ammunition to reject you. So we'll talk about how to answer this in a minute. I'm going to go on a little bit because we're going to talk about telling about yourself. And yes, that is asked more and more and more. So you can, someone yesterday said they hadn't been asked that question in their last interviews, but it's way up in the high 90s that's going to get asked. Tell me about yourself. So I think if you think about this question, there are a couple of other questions that might help you answer this better. If you say, if you equate that to why should we hire you? Okay, that's really what you want to answer. And even what are your 3 greatest strengths? All of these should come together and should have a very similar answer. Obviously, some wording around how you present this might change a little bit, but when you prepare this, you want to make sure that you're telling them about the part of you that's important for them to decide that you have what they're looking for. So that's why you want to do that framework at the beginning. That's why you want to you want to know what they're looking for. You really need to know what the job is calling for and what they're looking for. So when you present the tell me about yourself, you might have some really cool things that aren't relevant to the job. Don't throw that in here, because that's, it takes away from what they need to know. Again, make it easy for them to get that you're the one they want to continue the conversation with. So here we go. Tell me about yourself, AKA why should we hire you? Here we go again. Future performance is based on past performance. So you want to, that's the understanding, that's the premise that all these interviews are based on. Even though you go, I have the basic skills, I should be, whether I've done it or not shouldn't be, they should look beyond that. Well, truth of the matter is they're looking for what they're looking for. And you might not have everything, but you sure want to, again, put your best foot forward. So know that their idea of their frame of mind is that whatever you've done in the past is going to predict what you're going to do in the future. Again, here we go. I told you I'm going to keep repeating it. Identify the top 4 or 5 qualifications or experience required in the job description. Write out the 2 or 3 complete sentences that describe your achievements. And then make sure that those achievements are relevant what they need. Results this will form the basic framework for telling me about yourself. Recruiters call it TMA, but that's why it says TMA. It's just the acronym. Not only will it form the basic framework to be able to answer, tell me about yourself, but it will really help you form good answers to other questions that they'll ask you. As we'll see in a minute, when they get down to asking you behavioral questions, tell me about a time when, then you're going to want to give them good examples that relate to them as much as possible. So here's what is your biggest weakness. Okay, I talked about this a little bit. And basically, again, I don't believe in helping them reject you. So what you want to do is talk about something more that might have been a weakness at some point in your career, or might not have been, but that you've overcome it. So it could be something like this, where this wasn't really a weakness. When I was earlier in my career, I was an individual contributor, and I always, prided myself on my ability to solve problems. I mean, I was like that as a kid. And so I wanted to, I would work on a problem until I felt like I had the best solution. And I wouldn't always go and ask other people what they thought. I just thought I could do this on my own. But as I took over management responsibilities and I had a team, and I started realizing, well, I don't have time to do that because I have all these other responsibilities. And I thought, I have to hire, or if I've inherited, I have to work with my team to make sure they have what they need to be able to solve these problems. So now my job is not to solve the problem, but to make sure my team can solve the problem. And what that does is that it gives them the feeling I had before of a sense of accomplishment, and that makes them happier employees, which we're always looking for. And I hate to say it, but I've learned that they have better solutions sometimes than I do for some problems. So that's one way to answer it. Could be that you could say, I'm an individual contributor, and when I first started my job, I was getting all sorts of projects from my manager and then from other managers, and with deadlines, and I was, I just started working really long hours, and I get things done on time. And then after a while, I began to resent my manager and the company. I thought, I don't like this job. And I talked to some friends, or some people who have been a mentor, and I learned, okay, here's the thing, I need to push back, but in a nice way. So I learned how to go back to my manager and say, okay, you've just given me this new project, but here are the things that I have on my action item list that you've assigned me previously. Can we go? I don't think I can get everything done by the end of this week. Can we go through and reprioritize? And so, and then the wind up to this answer is, I found out, I realized that she was open to that and just wasn't thinking about it ahead of time, and that she respected me for being able to do that. Now I'm doing just as good at work, but actually better, because I'm not working as long hours, and I'm happier. I don't have to change jobs. So those are some two things you could do. Could be also that if the job is one where it doesn't require you to meet the public or to give presentations to large groups, you could say, well, I feel nervous in public speaking to large groups, something like that. Then you're not, that could be a current weakness, but it's not relevant to the job. Okay, what would you like to improve? That could be a little bit different, and you might get that question instead of what is your biggest weakness, and you can revert back to changing how you word the answers that I just gave already. Okay. Here's some other questions. Why do you want to leave your current job? Why are you looking for a new job? So I'm not going to go into detail on how to answer all these questions, because I have a bunch more coming up. I'm just giving you some ideas of questions that you might get asked. When we get to the end, if you have some questions, you might have something that you'd like to ask about that I haven't mentioned. But you're going to need to be able to tell people why you're looking for a new job. I advise to always keep it positive. Don't ever say anything negative about a current or a former employer. Don't let them lead you into it, that go, oh, I heard they were really, that your manager, oh, do you work for so-and-so? I used to work with them at another company. I heard that they're really hard to work with. They may be, but don't step into that, okay? Don't, it could be a trick, a test, or it could just be, it's just not wise to go there. And it takes away from what you're there for. You're there, remember, to make sure they understand that you have the skills, experience they're looking for. So make it positive. Obviously, if your company's had layoffs, everybody's gone through, not everybody, but a lot of people have gone through that. So, that could be one of the reasons. It could be that you took some time off during COVID and you're back to work. Those are all real things for people. Why are you applying for this job? Why are you interested in us? So you really, again, you need to do some homework. You need to know the organization. You need to know, what's good about them. You need to be able to tell them why you want to do the work that they're looking for. That they're advertising for, and you want to know what it's kind of like, okay, all this is dating, right? So you want to be able to show them why you want them, because everybody likes to feel special. So you want to have some positive things to say to them about their organization and the particular job, what it does for you. Walk me through your resume. So I think I should put this slide somewhere up at the top, because walk me through your resume is the question that many people answer when they get asked, tell me about yourself. And they're two different questions. So tell me about yourself is not starting out with the beginning of your life or your career or your background and going through to where we are now. That tell me about yourself is what we already talked about. Walk me through your resume is that. That's walking you from the earliest part of your career up to today. Now, what you want to do, if you get asked this question, you want to be careful so that you don't want to take forever if you've got a long career. You want to have the least information for the early things. They are less important. People are really interested in what you've done in the past 5 years, 8 years, because, so the idea being what you've done more recently is something you could do better. That's could be debatable, but that's the frame of mind. So when you start with the old stuff and just keep it minimal, then what you want to do when you do whatever you mention about these jobs should be relevant to what this job you're applying for is. I repeat the word relevant a lot, obviously, but it's important. So let's say one of your jobs in the middle of your career, maybe 10% of it was actually directly relevant, not the whole job. That's the part, that 10% is what you want to tell them about, because you're not going to tell them everything you did anyway. You're going to tell them a piece that's relevant to them. They don't need to know that it was only 10%. You just want to talk about the achievements that are relevant. It's what they want. What are you most proud of? Is another question. Again, you want to be able to, there was actually this series of questions, I'm going to put them up there. Describe your most important success and why it was important. What are your greatest accomplishments in your current or previous job? These are all very similar. What is the most challenging aspect of your current or previous job? So they could ask, you know, what is your greatest accomplishment, period. So that's one question, but they could be specific about each position, or at least the most recent ones. Obviously, you know, a good answer for all of these questions is to take a challenging situation that you turned around, so, you know, that you resolved a problem in a great way, and you're going to actually want to have several of these stories, because you may get all of these questions, or you might get some that we're going to go through similar ones. So the other part of your prep is, when I remember I said, okay, list each qualification, write a couple of sentences, and then you've got your tell me about yourself framework. Well, the next step in your prep is to actually go through and develop more stories of achievements, and ones that are as relevant as you can get them. And the point being, you may get several questions like these, and you want to have more than one success story. And that's what it's all about. Let's go back to what I said about drawing a picture. These story and the idea that past performance is a predictor of future performance. These stories illustrate to them that you've done these things before. Okay, so here's another. What do you like best about your job and least about your job? What you want to do here is, and this is the job you're leaving, what you want to do, or a job that you've left, what you want to do here is you want to make sure that what you like best about your job, that what you tell them is also something you're going to be able to get in this new job, and the opposite for least, because you don't want to say what I like best about my job is that I get to work at home 5 days a week, when in fact, this new job is going to require you to come in every day, or at least 3 days a week. Then they're going to go, well, why are you talking to us? So, you know, and if you don't know whether that's going to be required at the beginning, then don't. Anyway, you want to talk about the work. You don't want to talk about, I want to work at home. You want to really talk about what it is that you're doing that makes you feel good, or vice versa, or, you know, the opposite. Behavioral questions. So we probably all know about this these days. You know, people used to ask me, what's a behavioral question? And now we know. But I'm going to tell you anyway. They're about the past. Tell me about a time when. Describe a situation when. So we'll get to some of those. Tell me about a time when blah, 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 blah happened. And they may not say, and what did you do about it? But you want to add that on there. Situational questions, you've probably heard of them too. They're more about the future, and they're like hypotheticals. What would you do if? So here's a tip on the situational questions. Even though they're looking about, you know, they're talking about a hypothetical situation, what you really want to do is answer it with a real experience story, like those stories you've created. You go, again, past performance is a predictor of future performance. So you want to go, you know, okay, well, here's what I did in a similar situation before. So you're kind of answering the situational question with a hypothetical. Now, sometimes the situational question could be a case study where they give you some pieces of information and they want you to tell them what you would do in that case. Well, that's different. And I'm not going to go into details about case questions, but there's a lot of information on the internet, or you can always come see me and we can talk about it. Okay, so behavioral questions, you want to you want to think of yourself as a star. Again, this has been around for a while, so you may have heard this. STAR stands for situation, task, accomplishment, or activity, or action, and result. So you might have heard of PAR, which is problem, action, result. They kind of smush together the situation and the task. It could be action, accomplishment, achievement. Most people forget the result, and that's really the most important part. So you want to be your stories, when you tell them, when you give them examples and you tell them your stories, you want to make sure they understand what the situation is. What's the status quo? What was I, assigned to do about it or determined to do about it? What did I do? And what was the result of that? So here's another way to think about it. How did you make a difference? How did your contributions impact the company? So remember that you're working for an organization, whether it's a company, a corporate organization, or a nonprofit, or an academic organization. You want to be able to tell them how what you did made a difference. It's not enough to just say, I did these things. You want to show them the impact and how and that difference should be a positive difference. I should add that in there, positive difference. You don't want to tell stories where you screwed up and made things worse, right? That's, again, giving them ammunition to say bye. So you want to tell them how you made a positive difference, how you helped the organization. How did your contributions impact the company? And when at all possible, use metrics. You want to say, did you generate new revenues if you're in sales or marketing? How much more? And you want to use dollars or percentages depending on which can help you more. So for instance, if you're in sales and you've worked for a small organization or a medium-sized organization, and you had, your sales for the year were in the hundreds of thousands, that's great. But if you're applying for a company that's much larger and they're looking for people who can sell 1 million or more in a year, then maybe you want to go back to percentages and say, well, I generated, 10% or 20% new revenues in my territory. So that's a much better way to do it. And it could be, it could be a time when dollars would make a difference. Did you decrease costs? So maybe you're not in sales, but you're in a job where your job is to do process improvement. Your job is to help, reduce costs, and that in itself improves the bottom line, the profit margin. So both of these would do that. How did you, what did you do, do that? So you're telling your story, and you may have created a new process that now has turned a week-long process into 2 hours. And that's pretty phenomenal. So because time saved is also money saved, right? Time is money. Were you innovative? Did you create something new? So maybe numbers can't be involved in this one. Maybe you can't use numbers per se, but you created the first ever manual user guide for a particular system or a particular process in your organization. Use words like that, first ever, initiated, and so forth. How did your contributions impact the company? Well, that's, I'm just repeating myself, as we can see. I told you I'd do that. It's important. Okay, other behavioral questions you might get asked are things like, describe a situation when you took leadership and showed initiative. That means you're not just waiting for somebody to tell you what to do all the time, but you're looking at things and you're going, I could do this better. Now, depending on where you work, you might have to get some some approvals. You don't want to be a bull in a china shop. On the other hand, you'll deal with the politics as they are, but you want to be able to tell this potential new employer times that you did that. I was going to say something and I lost my train of thought. Oh, that's not good. Okay, let's just go on to the next one. Describe a situation where you significantly changed or improved something as changed from the old way of doing things. This could be this, you know, it's the same question, but you might get asked it in different ways. Tell me about a time when something went wrong and what you did about it. So again, I said earlier that good stories to tell are ones where there were challenges and how you overcame them. So they might just say, tell me about a time when something went wrong. Well, don't just leave them with the bad stuff. Make sure you tell them, you know, what you did to fix it or make it better. And if you didn't do that, then find another example. Here's one that's a little, you know, I've got two more questions that come back to you. Describe a situation when you had to reconsider your initial strategy and change it, and why. So you might have wanted to do something, you know, some way, and then you realized, oops, it's not going to work. And this is what we did to change that and make it better. Describe a situation where you made a mistake and what you did about it. So that thing, the previous one where I said something went wrong, well, that could be a mistake, your mistake too, or it could be something else. It could be somebody else's mistake. It could just be something popped up unexpectedly, as things always seem to do. And so you want to be able to talk about, sometimes with tech companies, they'll usually say, tell me about a failure. Well, you always want to say, you know, you want to use an example that's not huge, not super impactful, one that isn't quite as relevant, but what you did about it. The whole idea is things happen. You know, a lot of people, most people can be successful when nothing goes wrong. It's what you do about it when things go wrong, whether it's because you did some, you know, you made a mistake or something else happened. So the idea is, what do you do about it, and what did you do about it in this situation? What if your views? I'm just going to put these up here. If you guys want a copy of my slide, well, this whole thing is going to be on YouTube, so you'll be able to go back and look at it. But I don't mind sending my slides too, if that's something you want, because we're getting close to the time, and I don't want to belabor everything. These are just, you know, you've seen these questions before, so I'm just giving you some examples of what you should be prepared for. Okay, do you have any questions for me? I'm not now asking you for questions for me personally, but I will in a minute. This is the question you get right at the end. They don't ever give it, sometimes, but rarely did they give you a chance to ask questions up front. So toward the end, they save a little bit of time sometimes. So you must have questions to ask. Never say you don't have any questions. Never, ever say you don't have any questions. You always have to have some questions. How you should be prepared for like 3 or 4. You may only get to ask 1 or 2, but you want to be prepared. And it could be that you're meeting with multiple people sequentially, and the first person might have answered your questions. And there may be questions you have, same ones of everybody. Although if those people have different roles, you might want to ask them questions more specific to their role. But you want to have questions, and if you've gotten to ask them all of the first person, it's okay to don't say to the next person, oh, so-and-so answered all my questions. Ask them again. First of all, they're not gonna, you know, the second person wasn't in the same room. And next, second of all, they may have different slants on the answers to those questions, and that will give you some information as well. So what do you ask? Ask questions that are relevant to the job and that show you understand what the job is about. So you know the basics, and you've done some research, and you have some examples. There's some questions that are relevant to the job. Don't ever ask questions like, what's your culture? What's your, you know, things like, what are your benefits? You know, not to ask that. But ask intelligent questions. Ask questions that you've done homework on the job in the company. Here's a way to think about it. Ask questions about the department you'll be in, the relationships within the department, and maybe the relationships with other people in other departments cross-functionally. You might ask, you know, is this a new position, or are you expanding your role? Or this, you know, people who are doing this. That tells you something. If it's a new position, then that's good. They're they're expanding. If it's a replacement, then you might want to say, oh, you know, did someone leave? You have to ask it a little bit judiciously, and you might find out something about the person that isn't there anymore. You might ask, about the level of collaboration within the organization. You might ask, what do they see as something you might be doing when in the first week or so of your job, and then the next few months, things like that. Before you leave, you want to say, I am interested in this opportunity. Again, it's dating. It's okay if you're the first one to say, I like you and I want to see you again. So, say that. And you might expand on that. You might say, I'm interested in this opportunity because blah, blah, blah. You can ask them if they haven't told you, what's the next step in your hiring process? When do you expect to make a decision? And when should I expect to hear about next steps? Now, these are perfectly fine. They should tell you this anyway, but they're fine for you to ask, not as your primary questions. Like I said, always have good questions that are about the job and maybe the department and the organization. But these are the last minute questions where you want to say, I like this. And I'm interested in continuing the process. And you can ask them these questions. It's to their benefit to let you know timing. That way you don't bug them when, every day. After the interview, it's not over till, okay, here's another question I want somebody to answer. Please.
It's not over until you give them a thank you note.
Thank you. Who is that? I can't see you.
Kelsey Griffith.
Thank you, Kelsey. You're right. So you say thank you. You want to do this as soon as possible after the interview, and you want to do it by email. And here's what you want to say. So a thank you is definitely the right thing to do. It's polite. It's the polite thing to do. And while you're writing it, you can do more than just say thank you and continue to sell yourself. So I call this the 4R thank you letter. I stole it from somebody else. So I will say that, and I can't even remember who at the moment. So it's not originally from me, but it works. So the first one is to help them remember you. Just, they're probably talking to a bunch of people. Just say, this is the usual thing you might say in a thank you. The next two are the ones that are really important and maybe different from what you're thinking. Reinforce. You want to review your assessment of the interview and restate aspects of your skills or achievements that arouse positive interest. So these below are just examples. So if, just again, this is not going to be very long. It should be no longer than half a page put into an email. But you want to just, trigger a positive memory. And the next one is recoup. So no matter how hard you worked with the framework and make sure you answered, you gave them information about all the things they needed to, you might have walked out of there and said, oh, I forgot to talk about such and such. Or they forgot to ask me about such and such, and that's on my list of top priorities. So I'm going to or I could add something to improve an answer that came up. I call this recoup. And remind, again, the very end is if they told you that you'll be hearing from someone next week, then just kind of remind them of that. That's your thank you letter. I'd like you to make use of that because it can help. And they're not going to hire you if you didn't have the skills and you didn't do well enough in the rest of the interview. They're not going to hire you just because you sent them a thank you letter and somebody else didn't. But it can help you a lot. Okay, so remember I said I was going to present that information 3 times. This is the last slide because I want you to remember this, and we have like 5 minutes or so for questions. Future performance is based on past performance, da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da. Okay, 3 times. You can tell that this is important to me, and only this week did I start including it several times in my presentation because it's so important. It works so much better for clients who in the interview, and you feel more comfortable. So remember to answer all those questions that I presented. in your preparation as well. No question is difficult if you've got an answer for it. So, I think Paul said, to tell me about yourself is the hardest question or the most dreaded. You don't have to dread it if you have a good answer, right? Same with weakness. Okay, we have a few minutes. Nicole, what do you want to do?
Yes, there's one question actually about the tell me about yourself that someone asked. In terms of the length of that answer, kind of how long should it be? What's a good,
I would shoot for about 3 minutes. So that means if you're giving an example in that tell me about yourself, you're going to or if you're going to have a bullet point kind of a thing, just have the skeleton of it enough to sort of whet their appetite. And if they want to know more about that item, they can ask about it and you can elaborate, or you could use the details in answer to some of the other questions. But you want to make sure you're not boring them. So make sure you're looking at their face too, so you can see whether their eyes have glazed over.
Sure. Do you still have to wear a suit and are interviews still as formal as they used to be?
Depends. My favorite answer to most questions, it can range. I would, at the very lowest level, I would wear something that you would consider business casual. So, whether you're, a woman or a man, it might be same or different. But if you're going to interview for a bank or something, a New York financial services firm, then I would probably dress up in suit attire. At most places these days are not that dressy. And if, wearing a suit in a place where it's a casual environment, that could be a mark against you also, if it's, like super conservative. A step down for that for men could be, a button-down long sleeve shirt with a sport coat or a suit jacket without a tie. One thing you can do is to try to do some research on this. Try to find, sometimes on the job description or in their on their career site page, companies will talk about their casual environment. Look at the pictures of what people are wearing, and if they're all in jeans and shorts, again, business casual should be the lowest level, so that you can, you might have a shirt and, depending if it's in person, shirt and, just make sure you've got that you're clean and neat and your clothes are not wrinkle free and your shoes are polished. And if you're Zooming, then it doesn't matter what kind of, I'm barefoot right now because it's so hot.
Secrets. Well, thank you so much. We are wrapping up and I see a couple of people are having to leave. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank you so much, Mauri, for all of this great advice. A lot of people said they were joining us today because they are going through a career change. And so, making all of your advice is so dead on. And especially when we're thinking about sharing those transferable skills. So thank you so much for all of that. For all of you, I have put the link to where you can find the recording later on YouTube in the chat box. I've also put a link to where you can find Mauri's information on our website. As I said, she's one of our career coaches. So that is in the website as well. And I don't know, we have like 1 second left. Is it good practice to bring something prepared that you could present the interviewer that could help the company grow in any way? So we could just take one last one and then I'll leave you with closing thoughts.
Oh, I thought it was something. Closing thoughts. Yeah, remember you're there to tell them that you are what they want. And remember to smile. And please seek me out if you'd like some additional help, and go Greenies.
Yes. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us today. We'll be back next week with a session on developing executive presence. So if you're interested in that, you can join us online and find that on the alumni.tulane.edu website. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mauri. This was really great. And
bye, everybody.
Participating. Have a great day.
Thank you.